Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ananda N Sabilla from XII Science 2. And now I'm gonna explain how aurora is formed. So aurora, or a form of glowing light, is a natural phenomenon that usually occurs in the north and south poles. Auroras are visible almost every night near the Arctic and Antarctic circles, which are about 66.5 degrees north and south of the equator. This natural phenomenon is caused by the collision of energetic charged particles with atoms in the high-altitude atmosphere. In the northern pole, the aurora is known as Aurora Borealis, which means the goddess dawn of north wind, while in the southern pole, the aurora is known as Aurora Australis. The aurora of the northern and southern glow a greenish, or sometimes faint red color, sometimes blue, but most often that the aurora is green. Auroras can be seen at night because their light is not as strong as the light of the day. The activity that creates auroras begins with the sun. The sun is a ball of superhot gases made up of electrically charged particles called ions. The ions, which continuously stream from the sun's surface, are called the solar wind. As the solar wind approaches the Earth, it meets the Earth's magnetic field. Without this magnetic field protecting the planet, the solar wind would blow away Earth's fragile atmosphere, preventing our life. Most of the solar wind is blocked by the magnetosphere, and the ions forced around the planet continue to travel farther into the solar system. Although most of the solar wind is blocked by the magnetosphere, some of the ions become briefly trapped in a ring-shaped holding areas around the planet. These areas in a region of the atmosphere called the ionosphere. Ionospheres are centered around the Earth's geomagnetic poles. The geomagnetic poles mark the tilted axis of the Earth's magnetic field. They lie about 13 kilometers or 800 miles from the geographic poles, but are slowly moving. In the ionosphere, the ions of the solar wind collide with the atoms of oxygen and nitrogen from the Earth's atmosphere. The energy released during these collisions causes a colorful glowing halo around the poles, an aurora. Most auroras happen about 97 to 1,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. The most active auroras happen when the solar wind is the strongest. The solar wind is usually constant, but the solar weather, the heating and cooling of different parts of the sun can change daily. Solar weather is often measured in sunspots. Sunspots are the coldest parts of the sun and appear as dark blobs on its white-hot surface. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections are associated with sunspots. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections are sudden, extra bursts of energy in the solar wind. Sunspot activity is tracked over an 11-year cycle. Bright, consistent, auroras are most visible during the height of sunspot activity. Some increased activity in the solar wind happens during every equinox. These regular fluctuations are known as magnetic storms. Magnetic storms can lead to auroras being seen in the mid-latitudes during the time around the spring and autumn. Auroras have been visible as far south as the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Magnetic storms and active auroras can sometimes interfere with communications. They can disrupt radio and radar signals. Intense magnetic storms can even disable communication satellites. The colors of the aurora vary, depending on altitude and the kind of atoms involved. If ions strike oxygen atoms hiding in the atmosphere, the interaction produces a red glow. But this is an unusual aurora. The most familiar display is a green-yellow hue that occurs as ions strike oxygen at lower altitudes. Reddish and bluish light that often appears in the lower fringes of auroras is produced by ions striking atoms of nitrogen. Ions striking hydrogen and helium atoms can produce blue and purple auroras. Although our eyes can rarely detect this part of the electromagnetic spectrum, the aurora can be seen most strongly at the poles of the Earth, which are called Aurora Borealis in the north and Aurora Australis in the south. The aurora in the northern hemisphere is the most clearly visible aurora can be seen. The reason why the aurora can only be seen at the poles is based on how the Earth's magnetic field acts. The Earth has a metal core and it acts like a bar magnet with two poles and a magnetic field that pulls the protons and electrons from the solar wind. So, the phenomenon is more common in the polar regions. So that's pretty much how aurora is formed. Thanks for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.